Hi, my name is Varud Gupta. I'm a writer, author behind the book Bhagwan Ke Pakwan, a travelogue through the faiths and foods of India, as well as the graphic novel Chotu, which is a tale of partition and love set in 1947 Chandni Chowk. And today with Avid Learning, we're going to talk a little bit about food writing as a genre. So where to begin with food writing? The first thing I recommend doing is think about the dish, the food itself, as just one part of a larger story. Look at any great writer, Julia Child. Food was simply a way of expressing the joys of being in the kitchen. Look at Harold McGee or Alton Brown. Food was very much a way of exploring the science behind it. Michael Pollan, how we consume. Even some amazing TV shows like Midnight Diner or Samurai Gourmet, where it talks about food as a way of bringing people together or people's own memories of nostalgia with a dish. With Bhagwan Ke Pakwan, it was very much a story around food of these cultures, often forgotten, often dying off, and how food had become part of their faith, and how faith had in turn shaped the food that they eat. To speak from the book, what we did was in each of these subcultures throughout India, we found that food was not just something that was being consumed, but was a very integral part of their life and often in a way associated with faith. For example, in Spiti, you had Buddhist monks who would glob a lob of ghee on top of the rim of the glass as an offering to the pretas, the hungry ghosts, before drinking. And their diet was very much inspired by the geography and the climate of that surrounds the north of India. In Kolkata, we had this community of Baghdadi Jews that had gone from thousands back in the time of World War I to now a community of maybe just about 20 people left. And yet they're still persevering and pushing on to figure out how to preserve their faith, their food, and their community. And a lot of remnants of their culture kind of lingers throughout the streets of Kolkata today. So now that you've decided on what angle you want to take, whether it's exploring the history of a dish or analyzing consumer habits or the customs that surround a meal, you have to kind of figure out what lens you're going to decide on. Are you going to be first person or third person? Are you going to be subjective or objective about the material? As a writer, the story is about you, whether you want it to be or not. And you as a writer get to decide if you want to remain objective about the subject material, or are you going on an adventure and becoming a part of the story itself? And that decision that you make is going to actually change the interpretation and give a lens to the subject material. Each of these choices is going to change how your reader perceives this culture, cuisine, and specifically for Bhagwan Ke Pakwan, we decided to remain objective, but we threw in a little fun tidbits here and there as you understand the journey of going into these places. It's important to remember that this is the story of people. It's the story of who you're meeting and their cultures. And as someone who now is sharing the story of another, you have an innate responsibility to try and be authentic to the experience. So one thing I'd like to do is not do too much research of other people's experiences and their journeys before going on whatever sort of adventure you're going on with this food piece. But also, when you're trying to be authentic to the experience, try to cast light on new and exciting perspectives, things that people might have not seen or talked about before. Don't try to add too many artificial filters or hide in the perspective for terms of entertainment or comedy, although I know that's a hard thing to resist. And don't place people on a pedestal. Don't also then describe lives in squalor for the sake of privileged entertainment. By writing, you're very much adding your own voice to this experience, so choose carefully how you want to do that. Putting it all together, there's a lot more that's going on more than just the writing itself. First, it's traveling, and traveling doesn't always have to be physical. You can travel to a different country, or you can travel to a forgotten culture of the past and scour through old books and recipes now forgotten. You can travel to the future and kind of hypothesize where consuming is going to go and on what are the trends that are going to take us there. And those are just as important topics when it comes to food, because talking about the impact of what we're doing right now becomes vital to figuring out where we're heading in terms of consumption into the future. You need time to explore, and if you're going to a new place, don't decide on your story too early on in the process. Have your base research, but don't overconsume before the experience, so you're open to the new ideas and new perspectives when you reach on ground. And food is one of those rare things that touches upon all our senses, from taste to touch to smell to memory. And so be sure to experience the full array of things when you are eating or experiencing that dish or traveling through the food markets, and understand how all these different senses are coming into play. And I tend to use a dictaphone on location, so I don't have to worry about jotting every single note specifically. I'll have a journal if anything major hits me, so I know where to go back in my notes and pick up those voice notes. But very much keep yourself open to the experience when you are exploring at these places. And after a few years of writing, I know a lot of writers like to talk about routine. I have stopped worrying about routine too much. I like to set my goals, not in terms of word count, but in terms of milestones within a project, and don't fret too much about that first draft. Chances are it's going to be not that great, but the first draft is very much about you getting your ideas onto paper, and yes, you are going to have to edit many times after that. And if you do hit writer's block, which is another thing people like to talk about a lot, what I've realized for myself is that there's usually a reason behind it, whether it's what you're working on right now does not work and you're trying to force too many pieces together, or it's a lot of emotional attachment, whether you're feeling lazy about having to do a rewrite, or you fear about your writing and you're not sure if it's good enough. And so I think these are the reasons what actually cause us to procrastinate in our work and have mental block. And so the best thing that you can do at that time is show your work to somebody else to get their feedback. So closing the session on food writing out, one consequence about writing about food is that you do tend to eat a lot of food. So one thing you have to be good at is picking your battles. When I'm at home, when I'm not on the road, I tend to eat healthier. Can't say healthy. But yeah, other than that, remember, decide what the story is that you want to tell. Decide the lens that you want to take it, and decide how you want to tell that story, and just jump right into it. You won't find it until you start writing. A lot of this book didn't come until we actually arrived on location, started interacting with people. And one of my favorite storylines is from Meghalaya, and that's where we're going to end it with a little snippet of the story that came out about the food, but the fate and the culture of the Karbi tribe living up in Meghalaya's hills.
So I'd like you to me to tell you the story of this village. Formerly, it was not called Gongmaset; it was called Paham Indi. It is the place where natural fire occurred and burned the houses, burned the residences due to probably actions of spiritual spirits. That's what they believe. Huh? Rice beer is part of the food of the gods. Not get drunk also. Simply they get lively.
So Christianity came to Northeast in 1890 through the Society of the Divine Savior. And the people first of all narrated that story. See, life here is miserable. So let us go for a new life, new path.